This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Whisper Room, Eventide Audio, Spectra 1964, and Roswell Pro Audio. So get ready to rock.
I got a text message from Kirk Johnson, Prince's personal manager, and he said that he needed somebody to run an SSL and record the tape. I texted back, thanks, I can't, I've never run a tape machine before. And then my phone rang and it was him, and he was like, that's okay, just come right now and we'll figure it out.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. The Spectra 1964 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and a linear output, irrespective of transient audio peaks. In the studio, this means that critical details from your microphone get through to your DAW. The 101 was used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stack Studios, and The Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, and John Lennon. Today, Spectra 1964 brings that same incredible sound to your studio with the STX 100 mic pre. Learn more at Spectra1964.com. What do Michael Brower, Joe Ciccarelli, Dave Pensato, and George Massenburg all have in common? They all have great things to say about Eventide. Originating in a New York City basement in 1971 with the original Instant Phaser and H910 harmonizer, Eventide continues to transform the sound of music with the iconic H9000 harmonizer, visionary guitar effects like the H9 pedal, and now a whole suite of incredible plugins for your studio. Go to eventide.com to learn more or click the link in the show notes below. If you're sick of bothering the neighbors when you are trying to record your music or ruining your recordings with outside noises, but you're not ready to spend a ton of money on permanent studio construction yet, then consider getting a Whisper Room ISO booth for your studio. Whisper Room offers the instant solution for a comfortable, quiet, ventilated, portable ISO booth with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booth when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars. Go to whisperroom.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Evan Bakke, the chief engineer at Power Station New England in Waterford, Connecticut. Originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Evan started working under producers Matt Kirkwold and James Fluff Harley at MasterMix Studios and the Boiler Room, and also at PoundSound in St. Paul, partnering on many projects with producer-mixer Jeremy Tappero. In 2009, spent a couple of years in Las Paz, Bolivia, South America, and built a recording studio in Che Guevara's old house, before ending up back in Minneapolis to work as Prince's personal recording engineer in 2013 and 14. More recently, in 2015, Evan moved to Connecticut to become the chief engineer at Power Station New England. I've put together a playlist of Evan's work in the blog show notes, and the tracks are a variety of consistently great-sounding recordings in different genres. So I'm psyched to dig into some great recording techniques here with Evan, learn more about running a pro studio in Connecticut, and perhaps even hear some cool stories about working with Prince. We'll see. Please welcome Evan Bakke to Recording Studio Rockstars. Evan, are you ready to rock, dude?
Let's do it.
Great to have you here on the show, man. It was nice to run into you at the AES event in New York, too.
Yeah, that was great, man. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. This is awesome. I love this show.
My pleasure. It was really cool to sort of discover you and the power station. What a beautiful looking studio.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's designed after the power station in Midtown, so it's like it's not an exact replica, but it's pretty close. It's amazing. It's awesome.
Well, we can circle back on it, but rock stars, be aware that it is just like when you look at it, it almost looks like you're inside a giant recording sauna, not because of the heat, but because you're just surrounded by gorgeous wood in every direction.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in it right now.
Oh, cool, man. Right on. You're not in the live room though, right?
I'm in they call it the rhythm room. So it's the back dry, room. So if you're looking from the control room, there's a booth in the back right. That's where I'm sitting.
Very cool. Well, so let us know a little bit more in your own words about who you are and how you got started out in recording and stuff.
Well, like you said, I'm Evan Bakke, originally from Minnesota. I guess I started when my dad bought me a acoustic guitar, a little Alvarez acoustic guitar when I was maybe 13 or 14, and I was no good, but I could figure out how to record myself, so I did that. And
nice. My first one was an Alvarez too. Alvarez Festival.
Yeah, mine might be a festival. It's possible. Yeah, I think it is. And it still sounds good, actually.
Yeah, mine has since turned into a high string because the action got a little wacky.
Yeah. I haven't played it for a while, but last time I did it was good. Anyways, then I went to a music school in downtown Minneapolis. It was run by Tom Tucker. He was an amazing engineer. He passed away a few years ago. And while I was there, I got the opportunity to start working with this guy, James Harley, as his assistant. Actually, for him and his assistant, Nate Smazel. And those guys taught me more in 1 week than I could have learned in 10 years of school. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a real benefit to being in a studio and watching people really do it.
Yep. And it was good to sit back and see. It was good to see like an assistant and an engineer communicate with each other and see that relationship before I really sat in that chair.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because when I did, I was just ready to. I was kind of ready to go, and it was pretty natural. But I was not expecting. I wasn't expecting what it was, so it was good. It was a good experience.
What? And you said you had already done some recording school at that point, or this was even before you got into that?
Yeah, I think I was at least a year, maybe a little more into recording school at that point.
What kind of stuff were you guys learning? Was it tape machines? Was it all Pro Tools at that point?
It was all Pro Tools. There might have been a class on like an analog class that actually Eddie Chiletti would have taught.
Oh wow!
And I didn't take that class. I know Eddie really well though. And so everything was Pro Tools. There were a bunch of I can't remember what they called them, but there are Pro Tools rooms with just like, you walk in a room and there's 30 computer rigs with Pro Tools. And so I would sit in those rooms until 4 a.m, almost every day. And then worked my way into a Trident 80 series room. And let's see, what else do they have? Like the D commands had just come out, and they had an SSL too. So there were a couple consoles, but everything was Pro Tools.
Well, you guys have some gorgeous consoles at the power station. I noticed, I think you have a Neve 8068, right?
Yep. 32 channels. It's awesome. It's amazing.
That's the one, or that's the same kind of console we had at Woodland Studios when I was interning down here in Nashville.
Cool.
Gorgeous.
It's the greatest. I love it. Yeah, it's amazing.
How long have you guys had that board?
We got it from Vintage King going on 4 years ago. It came from Pachyderm, which was actually in Minnesota.
Wow. So it's the same one that did In Utero?
Yep, same one that did In Utero. Did a lot of really amazing records at Pachyderm. There were some sweet records done there. So yeah, In Utero, and before it was in Pachyderm, it was if I get the story actually straight, I've heard a lot of different rumors, but it was at Electric Lady before that. It started at Electric Lady.
It's just jumping all across the country.
Right. Yeah. And it did some pretty sweet records there too.
So Rockstar's Electric Lady's in New York and Manhattan, right? And then Pachyderm, it jumps all the way over to Minneapolis, or at least Minnesota, right?
Yeah, it's about an hour south of Minneapolis.
Yeah. And then it jumps back to Connecticut for you guys at the power station.
Yep.
Right on. Okay, cool. So you're in the rooms working with Pro Tools, then you finally get into the console, the room with the console, and what was it, like a Trident 80B or something like that?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
That's a cool board. Those are great rock and roll consoles.
Great console. Yeah, love that console. Yep.
Very clean and punchy, and you can get a nice crisp top end.
Yep, exactly. Yep. I still love Trident consoles. I worked on one for years in St. Paul at PoundSound. You had mentioned that in the intro, but yeah, my friend Jeremy Tappero has a 70 series.
Cool.
Which is basically the same thing as an 80, but super cool.
What's some of the stuff that you remember learning about it first when you were in the studio? Watching an assistant work with a pro engineer or producer. Versus maybe what you thought things were like.
I think I realized how, at least at that point, being an assistant was being organized on a level that I had never even thought was possible at that point. From documenting outboard gear to Pro Tools to the console, the whole thing was just it really had a very small margin of error to work with as an assistant, and so I picked up on that really quickly and developed a really a way of taking notes that I actually still use to this day, and then at some point incorporated that into my Pro Tools sessions. So it was kind of like this kind of flawless, or not flawless, but at least in my mind, I never had any questions as to where anything was or how anything was working when it came to a console, outboard gear, and Pro Tools. It all had like a very similar documentation. So that was like the first and biggest, most important thing that I learned was detailed notes and knowing where everything is all the time.
When you say where everything is all the time, what do you mean?
I guess I just mean from the Pro Tool sessions to the console to the patch bay, just having an answer for the engineer whenever he needed it.
Right. No head scratching.
No head scratching. Head scratching wasn't allowed. Weren't allowed to scratch your head.
Head scratching is out. I was just scratching my head today as I was, getting into an older session, and it is frustrating. And I think about that, and it's like, it feels like there's a real balancing act between, how much time you want to put into documenting and organizing versus how much time you can afford to put in, depending on what kind of projects you're working on. Do you ever run into that? Do you feel like do you have any, thoughts about what's the right balance for each session?
Well, yeah, I do actually. I think that at this point, when it comes to Pro Tools and the way that I'm working when I'm actually tracking, I don't take too many notes. I do have assistants at the power station that are really great with their note taking. But my Pro Tools sessions all basically look identical at this point. Like I think I could probably open a session from 8 or 9 years ago and it would look really similar at least color coordination and organization as it does now. So I'm able to kind of keep that to a minimum. And when I'm mixing stuff that's sent in to me, that someone else tracked, I don't know, I just turn the faders up. I don't even really look at what the tracks are labeled as. Otherwise I think I'd go nuts.
Right.
Renaming everything. And then on the back end, if someone says, like, we need to work on this track that I've then relabeled as something else, or I just turn it up, and I don't really document other people's work that much.
I feel like it would be nice if almost there was like a double naming system in there where you could keep the old name and, put a new name.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well.
I guess you can in the notes underneath the track, I suppose, but I don't go that far.
The comments. Yeah. The first thing I do with the comments is I close that window. It takes so much space on the computer screen.
I do the same exact thing.
And I mean, honestly, we can gripe about it a little bit, but the window that allows you to name tracks has always been like an Achilles heel for Pro Tools, where it's this teeny tiny thing and you can barely fit any information in there. And you're like, man, even just doing like multiple takes of things starts to eat up all that little space. So it becomes a real challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, so do you want to talk a little bit about what your Pro Tools session is like? I mean, you described it being kind of a system of color coding and everything. What are some things you remember about how it's laid out and organized, and any thoughts you have about, maybe ours doesn't have to match yours, but here's some good tips on how to arrive at our own system for that.
Yeah, I think it's just probably repetition and what my brain has kind of naturally made my sessions do. But at the top, I've got, and this is for tracking and mixing basically, but at the top of the session or the very left of the mix window, I've got a master fader followed by a print track. My master fader is yellow and my print track is purple. And then from then I've got bass guitar, green, drums, brown, and then vocals, red. Lead vocals are bright red. My background vocals are dark red. Guitars are dark blue. Acoustic guitars are light blue. Piano is a different light blue, and then strings are like a teal. And all of my buses, auxes, any reverbs, effects, all that stuff has no color at all. So
that's interesting.
And that's also it's also when I'm on a console. So when I've got my console laid out, it's identical to what's going on in Pro Tools. So if I'm looking at the desk, that same order is what my Pro Tools screen is.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is really important. It's one of my, a pet peeve, I guess, in the studio is like, if a mic is going to come into mic line input 1 out on the floor, I want it to be on mic pre 1. I want it to go to input 1 to Pro Tools. I want everything to be 1. You don't want to have to like jump all over the place with your numbers and what's going to what.
Yep.
It'll just mess you up.
I feel the same way. Yep. And it just keeps things moving quickly.
Okay, so you talked about a print track. Can you explain to the rock stars what a print track is?
Yep. So I basically, for the most part, I'm always monitoring through the very final stage of my either recording or mixing process. So I've got just a stereo audio track that is always on input mode, and that's what I'm monitoring from. So I know at that point that everything that I'm listening to is going through that stereo track. Mm-hmm. That way, if there's any issues or anything, I know exactly what it's going to sound like. And at any time, I can just pop it into record mode, record where I'm at, and I've always got a reference of something that I was working on and where my head was at that point.
That's interesting. So it's like That's like a short circuit for, you don't even need to bounce the session for this moment. You can just sort of record onto that track a little snippet.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, cool. Because that was my next question is like, why do a print track? Why not just bounce sessions as mixes?
Yeah, I just really like, I guess I've always done it that way. But I like knowing that what I'm listening to is, I mean, there are things that can go wrong at any stage digitally, and analog too. But I like knowing exactly what I'm listening to is going to be exactly what whoever else is hearing that track is going to hear the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So let's see. What are some other things that you might do with that print track? Do you ever punch in on a mix and find that that's a handy thing? Like you need to just fix a tiny part of your mix, and so you only punch in little snippets, or am I just making up good reasons at this point?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't do that. I think like that would freak me out. If something felt weird, I would just reprint it. I mean, unless the song is super long. Right. I might do that, but in the end, the final mix will be a print start to finish without stopping.
Right. That's probably sensible, you know. The other thing is, I guess it means that you can't do the faster than real time bounce. And that's one reason why you might have been printing in the past too, is because I think if you go back far enough, the bounce didn't used to sound as good as printing to a track in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that too.
Yeah. You know, honestly, in my experience, faster than real-time bouncing isn't usually all that fast anyway, because I'm usually using so much processing.
Right.
It ends up being pretty close to the same.
Exactly. Yeah. I did do that. I'm trying to think about why I did that recently. But anyways,
a faster bounce.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember why. But it ended up being like 1.5 times the speed. So it didn't make a huge difference.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, I guess if you're printing a track back, it also gives you a chance to actually see what those levels look like and see what the waveform looks like after it's printed.
Yep, it does do that too.
That might be a nice visual insight into, you know, what's going on.
Yep, that's true.
Certainly back in the day, and probably still, honestly, you know, there was a real considered value to looking at your mix and going like, yeah, it looks like a brick, man. That means I got it right, you know?
Yeah. These days, I mean, I'm guilty of that. I'm still guilty of that sometimes, but I can say that I'm working heavily on not doing that like I used to. I'm still breaking it.
I'm still trying. I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, the loudness wars being in the past and dynamic range, you know, being valuable as far as streaming on streaming platforms, so you don't get penalized and that sort of thing. But still, in my experience, there's still a sweet spot for what sounds really good, or at least it seems it. Because one of the struggles is, you know, if you're trying to create something for a streaming destination, even though you can use some tools to kind of mimic what the streaming might do, you still don't really hear it until it's actually streaming, which means it's already been released, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true.
So,
and you know what? I just started on this, like, this kick of, I just got really into some Tim Palmer mixes. Actually, I've been into him for a while, but then also Flood, like some of those Depeche Mode songs, and I just kind of like the loudness is never an issue with those guys, and they're not as loud as records are now.
Yeah.
But they sound massive, and so it's really got my brain racked on attention to different details than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I think about that too. I mean, I think about like Dark Side of the Moon. I'm like, how
exactly?
You know, what does that look like on my screen? And I don't recall ever feeling like that was anything short of being just right.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Cool. Tell us and the Rockstars more about who Tim Palmer is.
Tim Palmer is an amazing engineer, amazing producer, amazing mixing engineer, and I use this song called "Trains" by Porcupine Tree. It's one of the first songs I play in any new room I go into. I just think it sounds so good. It's amazing.
Nice. And I think that that's an important thing, a reminder to all of us that like it is very valuable to know what sounds good to inspire you when you're in a space. And I think it's a good reminder too, to remember that it's not an absolute, like, just because somebody else played a particular track when they were showing off a space or a sound system doesn't mean that's the one that you have to use. You can find your own inspired mix.
Yep. Well, I think everybody should use Porcupine Tree Trains.
All right, there you go.
I'm just kidding.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
I'll check it out for sure after this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Maybe we can even sneak that into the YouTube playlist.
I think you should. Yeah.
Well, so I like to ask guests to share an inspirational quote as we kind of kick off the show too. You got anything you want to share with us? Something to get us psyched to just hit the studio?
Man, I think that anything that Levon Helm has ever said in his life is inspiring to me. Yeah, Levon Helm, if you give it good concentration, good energy, good heart, and good performance, the song will play you. I love that.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, it's like when all those things converge, it just kind of guides you on what to do with the song in the studio too.
Yeah, totally.
It's nice when it feels so great actually when you listen to something and you just know what is needed next and you go out and play that part or play that instrument. And it's kind of, you can discover things by accident, but boy, it kind of sucks a little bit. I mean, it's like you can really kill a lot of time just noodling around on an instrument, hoping you'll stumble on a good idea, Yeah,
it's true. Yeah. Yep. But you can also find some freaking great ideas that way too.
That's true. That's true. How do you like to do that process? What thoughts do you want to share on the unexpected exploration of sound for the next overdub, for example?
Man, I'm kind of into anything really. I love tracking bands live. If I can have the more good musicians in the room together playing off each other, like that is the best way to start and keep a creative process moving forward. But I'm totally into going down the rabbit hole with an artist and just finding some cool stuff to do and moving quick and just keep inspiration high. And as long as everyone's inspired, then I'm into trying anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if somebody's just messing around on a track and they play a whole bunch of stuff and a lot of it doesn't sound right, do you have a process that you find is like really useful for extracting the best stuff out of it?
Man, that's a good question. It I guess totally varies on the situation, but if I feel that something is lacking and going in a direction that's not really benefiting the song or what will be the final product, I can try and figure out ways to get things back on track. But I mean, really the most important thing is making sure everybody's having a really good time and having an inspired time. And as soon as that starts to fade, I try really hard to keep that momentum high.
Yeah, that's good advice. Just keeping everybody, there are a lot of things that will try and derail your session, especially when you're working with other people and they're getting frustrated, or especially if you have experience as the engineer or the producer and the people you're working with are a little bit greener in the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
That can bring excitement to the studio, but it can also bring very easily getting derailed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But there's also a cool thing about watching someone who's really green in the studio but is really talented, in the room with people who are seasoned, and watching them kind of almost immediately turned into a seasoned musician, like on the spot. That's a pretty cool thing to see.
Yeah, because usually people bring something to the studio with them.
Right.
There's a reason they're there.
Yeah.
And it may start with the ability to recognize what's really good and be followed by hopefully the ability to play what's really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, like when it comes down to it, if the players are good and the song is good, it's probably going to be really good. And if any one of those elements is not, it's tough to navigate that during while it's actually happening.
I did a mic shootout for my vocals in the studio and tried 20 different microphones, from the Shure SM7 to a vintage Neumann U67, but was impressed that my favorite of all was the Roswell Pro Audio Delphos 2 large diaphragm condenser. Handcrafted in California, Roswell Mics brings you inspired design and attention to detail to help you capture a gorgeous vintage sound without the vintage price tag. Check out their beautiful microphones, including the Mini K47 for only $349 at RoswellProAudio.com. I also like to ask guests to share kind of an important experience that might have been a failure in the studio, but turned out to be a real learning experience. You got anything you remember or want to talk about from, those early stages, or even maybe more recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm like fairly confident that I'm constantly failing and constantly learning from failures. But I think that one thing that I saw a lot of arguments in the studio when I was young, like some very like unnecessary arguments.
Did you ever see anybody throw the drum kit?
I saw chairs fly. I never saw the drum kit fly, but I saw chairs hit a wall a couple times. And like early on, I was totally into these like documentaries, like Some Kind of Monster, the making of Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. I still love it. But like, to me, it was kind of like, oh, this is how records are made. Like, people just get super mad and argue all the time.
Yeah. Behind the music, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I think that I ended up kind of pulling that attitude into my sessions at times when I just really didn't need to. And cause I just kind of thought it was normal that you just end up in these kind of little bickering things or arguments or whatever.
Yeah.
And then at some point, a friend of mine just kind of pulled me aside and was like, hey, this is like a totally cool, fun session, and we don't need to argue. And I was just like, wow, you're totally right. And that totally set me straight. And so I don't do that anymore.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you sure? I'm going to pick a fight with you, man. I bet you do. No, I'm just kidding.
No. You could try. I mean, I'm gonna just not let it happen, man.
Yeah, I think I had some of that too. I remember hearing stories about producers being, tyrants in the studio, or like, somebody, an intern or an assistant messes up and they get fired and they're never back in the studio again. You're like, wow, man, this world I'm learning to be a part of is so intense, and then you get into it, and then after a while, same thing that you said. It's like, you're just like, that's ridiculous. There's all kinds of great people making brilliant music that like their goal is to get along with people and for it to be a wonderful experience, not a crappy one.
Totally. Yep. I mean, totally.
Yeah. Well, so let's see. How about an aha moment for you? Something in the studio where you were like, where you remember things really clicking?
I think that I would say that kind of piggybacks on that failure of arguments in the studio, but I also did a lot of editing early on, like heavily editing.
Yeah.
My sessions
because you could,
because I could, and because I, in a way, like that when I started was the early 2000s, and like I was into rock music, and that's kind of how rock records were made at that point.
Yeah.
And so I kind of embraced that, and it really helped my Pro Tools speed and helped me figure out a cool workflow. But I think, Minneapolis has such a cool music scene, with a lot of, like, I would call them like really genuine artists in Minnesota. And one night, my friend Adam Krinsky, who's an amazing engineer, he was working in the basement of Twin Town Guitars in uptown Minneapolis, and I think it was like 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and I went down to see him, and he was just in this basement with just a bunch of people, so many people, and they were creating some of the coolest music I had heard at that point. It was so good. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what it sounds like. I just remember being like totally amazed at that there were hip hop guys and rock guys and just good friends and people that I'd never met before. And they were all just creating something so unique and so cool. And they were trying everything and it was like I walked into everybody so in the zone that nobody was messing up when they would try something. So everything that was tried just ended up working, and then everybody was hugging goodnight, and that was such an eye-opening experience for me, because I had such a machine-like attitude about recording at that point, where it was kind of like pre-production, and then record drums, and then record bass, and then record guitars, and then record vocals, and then edit all these things in between, and then tune, and then all these things. Where it was like it was it was like a black hole in my mind, just like exploded into a whole new world, and it was super cool.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is, I think one of the first things you discover and learn about in music is the idea that, like, the guy who's playing a million notes in the guitar solo, like that, it can be impressive, but it might actually not be all that cool for the song or whatever. It's like, yeah, we don't need that flashy part there, like playing too much musically. And we forget sometimes that it's the same thing for us when we're engineering. It's like, just because we can, and we learn these skills of like, oh, I know how to edit drums, I know how to tighten it all up, I know how to do all these cool things, and those are good skills to have. But it's like just playing way too many notes in the solo. You don't need it all the time.
Totally. I think I started to realize that, like, I might not have been really listening to what I was working on. Like, it was just kind of like, I made sure the parts were there, and then once the parts were there, I made sure they were locked in. But maybe they just didn't need that. It was, that's a big aha moment for sure.
Yeah, well, I always called it the magnifying glass. It's the zoom. You have to learn that. Like, you have to be zoomed out to have an over perspective of the song and what it's like to listen. It's one of the reasons why, like, turning the volume down, going halfway out of the room and listening like that, it just removes all this other stuff. So you're just totally step back listening, or listening in the car. But then when you work on things and you edit drums and you tune a vocal and everything, you have to be super zoomed in.
Totally. Yep.
And one of the things I remember learning early was like, oh shit, I can't be zoomed out and zoomed in at the same time. It's not possible.
Totally.
Like you just learn that, like, okay, right now I'm zoomed out. Okay, right now I'm zoomed in. And once you let that be, it makes it easier to just like do a task, finish it, step back, zoom back out again.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I at this point, honestly, I don't think I could tell you the last time I did that. I had that experience of editing everything and tuning everything. I don't do it anymore. It's just like, it's something that I'm just not, it's not a part of my workflow unless it's like totally necessary or it's, a creative decision. But
Well, it's funny, like you learn how to be a super editor, and then you come back later and you learn how to like use those skills when they're needed. So
Totally.
there are those times where the band, everybody hears a mistake somewhere and you just jump right in and you quickly, you fix it so fast that they're still waiting to talk about how it needs to be fixed. And you're like, no, I already did it. You just heard it. And they're like, whoa, how'd you do that?
Yep. Yeah, right. There's that. And then it keeps the flow. It keeps everybody's attention on what's important. And then, as soon as that thing is fixed, they don't have to worry about that thing anymore. And they're worried about making the song even better.
Yeah, that's a big part of the experience too, that I've noticed, is that like, it can be very easy to fixate on the three things that are bad when you play the song down and completely miss the fact that 90 things are great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. There's some truth to that.
One of the reasons why it's great to fix something right away for somebody if they need it.
Yep.
Cool, man. So you're in Minneapolis. It just so happens that you worked with somebody who was a wee bit famous named Prince. Do you want to share any story of what that experience was for you, or how you ended up doing that?
Sure. Yeah.
I understand that you may, if you tell us, you may have to kill us afterwards, but we're willing to. You
guys are all willing to take that?
We're willing to take the fall on this one.
All right. I was bouncing around quite a bit. I was kind of living out of my car, and doing a lot of traveling and just trying to I don't know, chase some sort of adventure that I had my whole life. I just couldn't really sit still. And I ended up in Minnesota after leaving for a few years and coming back and leaving again. And I kind of had this thing where every city that I was in before I would take off for the next one, I would find a good river and I would go do some fishing for an afternoon, and then I would hit the road the following morning.
Dude, there's no way you ran into Prince out fishing on a stream. I'm not buying it.
Nope. But I got rained out, so I decided to stick around for an extra day, so I could fish that following day. And I went. I had no cell phone service. Came back to my car, and I was going to go. I was basically going to go see my parents and tell them that I loved them and I would see them next time. And I got a text message from Kirk Johnson, Prince's personal manager, and he said that he needed somebody that could run an SSL and record the tape. And I texted back, and I had known a few people who have worked with Prince before, and the stories were rarely pleasing.
Right.
And so I was definitely cautious, and so I just texted him back. I said, thanks. I can't, I've never run a tape machine before. And then my phone rang and it was him, and he was like, that's okay. Just come right now and we'll figure it out. And I was like, I really can't use the tape machine. I was like, I'll be totally fine on your console, but I was like, I've never used it before. He was like, yeah, don't worry. We'll be all right. Just if you can just come tonight, just like help us get through the night.
That's wild.
And
you're
and
like, just as long as I can edit all of his vocals and drums.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because I'm real good.
Oh man, yeah. And until I got there in the evening, it was hot out. I think it was middle of August, and the sun was going down, but it was super hot. And I was haggard. I had literally just gotten done fishing. Like I was pretty disgusting.
Did you bring Prince a largemouth bass?
No, I was fishing for trout, but he had a rule: nothing with eyes or parents was allowed to be eaten in the studio.
That's funny.
So anyways, I got there and Kirk walked me into the studio and he was like, can you just set up a vocal chain and make sure everything's working and put some reverb on it. And so I did. He had a C12 that kind of hung on a big starboard stand, like from the other side of the SSL, hung straight over the center section. And he would sit down in his chair. So this mic hung right above his chair, and to the right.
Now, is the starboard? Is that the Triad Orbit stand? Those guys made a starboard.
I guess, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, sorry.
I'm not really sure, but it's one of those huge ones.
Yeah.
Big counterweight on it. And then to the right of that, there was a little headphone box, and then the tape machine controls, and I set the mic up. I got signal, it sounded fine, and I turned around and Prince was standing there. He just had walked in the room at some point when I had my back turned, and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself, and then we didn't shake hands. Like, I remembered wishing I shook his hand at that point, but we didn't. And then he asked me what kind of limiter I was using, and I put his vocal through a Great River preamp and into a Blackface 1176, and I showed him that, and he asked me why I wasn't using an LA2, and I was like, I can switch it, and he was like, no, why aren't you using it? And I was just like, because I thought that one would sound cool. And then he sat down at the mic and he started singing, and the needle on the 1176 just exploded, just completely exploded, and my gut was just like, oh no, like
just like totally slammed.
Totally slammed, like as hard as that thing can be slammed. And I went down to turn it down a little bit, and he said, don't touch anything, it's perfect.
Awesome. And
I was like, great. And he said, can you come back in a couple hours? And so he had his band living at a hotel down the road, so he got me a room there, and I didn't even go in the room. I went and got a cup of coffee, and I just started driving around. Just like, no way I was going to go sit on a bed watching TV.
Right.
And after he checked the mic, he went out into the hall and came back with a 2-inch reel, and it was like, let's put this song on. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me! Like, this is my worst nightmare. I've never put a reel of tape on a tape machine before. I've never done anything with tape before. And I took the box that said Electric Lady on it, and I walked into the tape room, into the machine room, and I just freaking did it. Like, I just put it on and hit rewind until the beginning and hit play, and it worked. And then he said it was the wrong song, and he gave me a different box, a different tape, different 2-inch reel, and I put that one on. And then he called me like 5 hours later, and I came in, I did a mix for him, and then we burnt the CD, and he walked me to the door and asked me if I could clear my schedule, and I started working for him then.
What a trip, man. What an awesome story.
Total trip. It's still is just kind of like the more time that passes, it's like it feels a little less real for some reason.
That's wild, man. That's wild. Who was the first person you called when you got back home to your hotel? You had to call somebody and be like, dude, you won't believe what just happened.
Yeah, I was probably my dad, I remember my dad when I was just a little kid, like really little. We were living in New Jersey, so I had to have been like 6 or 7 years old. I remember Prince being on the TV and he was playing acoustic guitar and he would do these things where he would stop playing and he would get up and dance and twirl around, and then he would start playing again and he would dance and twirl around. And I remember my dad saying that he's the best performer that's alive. And so I was never a fan of his. My knowledge of his music was basically Little Red Corvette and 1999, in Purple Rain, that was it. I didn't know he was so good. I had no clue how amazing that guy was.
That's a trip, man. Well, hey, let's take a break for a minute, and thank you for sharing that stories. Rockstars will be back in just a minute with Evan for the jam session. A reminder that we've got links to stuff we're talking about in the show notes, including a playlist where you can go check out Evan's work and listen to some of it right now. And we'll see you guys in just a minute for the jam session. The Spectra 1964 model was created by the missile engineers who are central in rolling out the systems that have protected the free world for over half a century. The extremely stable high-circuit design of the 101 amplifier provides unequaled headroom, low noise, and linear output, irrespective of transient audio peaks, giving you clearer, punchier, dynamic recordings. During the height of record making, the 101 preamp was the perfect choice to build consoles for Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, Stax Studios, Ardent Studios, and New York City Record Plant, bringing you the sounds of ZZ Top, Aerosmith, Bruce Springsteen, King Crimson, John Lennon, and so many more. The Spectra 1964 legacy is carried on today through Bill Cheney and Jim Romney. Now you can get that same sound in your studio with the STX 100 mic pre and STX 500 EQ. Add the Cinemag Transformer BBDI and the C610 comp limiter, and you can have a truly awesome sound. Go to Spectra1964.com to learn more or click the link in the show notes below. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio far into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. It was 1971 in a New York City basement when Eventide revolutionized the audio world by introducing the world's first studio effects processor, the Instant Phaser, and the first digital effect, the H910 Harmonizer. Eventide soon followed with the Instant Flanger, Omnipressor, SP2016 Reverb, and H949 and H3000 Harmonizers, which have been favorites of A-list mixers like Michael Brower, Joe Ciccarelli, Mick Guzowski, and Dave Pensato, and heard on countless hit records over the decades. Today, Eventide brings all that sound to your stage and studio with modern solutions like the H9000 Harmonizer, their complete line of guitar pedals, including the versatile H9 Max, and transformative plugins like Micropitch, Physion, Black Hole, and Mangled Reverb. Take your next mix in your studio to a whole new level. Go to eventide.com or click the link in the show notes below. Are you sick of bothering family and neighbors when you're just trying to rehearse or record your music? Do outside noises or computer fans get into your studio mics and ruin your recordings? You could book a pro studio to record every time, but that would add up quickly, and doing permanent construction to soundproof your studio can easily cost up to $100,000 or more. Trust me, I know. And you can't take that with you when you eventually move the studio. Don't you wish there was an easy solution right now? Whisper Room ISO Booths offers a simple way to install install a comfortable, quiet, ventilated ISO booth in your studio with easy line of sight for recording vocals, guitar amps, or even drums in a variety of sizes. For 30 years, Whisper Room has been solving studio isolation needs worldwide with ISO booths that are shippable, portable, and can be assembled in an afternoon. Now you can get pro vocal recordings right in your home studio, practice whenever you want, and start using real guitar amps again. Get 10% off the 4x4 or 4x6 booths when you mention Recording Studio Rockstars at whisperroom.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest is Evan Bakke, joining us from the power station in Connecticut. And we just got to hear what Prince's vocal chain is. That's pretty cool, dude. Are you ready to jam?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right, man. Maybe you want to share more about it, but you were also talking sort of off mic about the energy and the excitement and the thrill of working with Prince in the studio and then going home, and it's sort of like, it was like reverse the way you said it. Like when you're at the studio, the thrill just turns into just like business as usual, but then when you leave, it like comes flooding back again.
Yeah, I think it was just more of like, I don't know, I guess I would get amped up on my way to the studio and just kind of like, I've had a lot of friends that have worked with him before, and it's kind of always this general like saying that every day could be your last day working for him, and he might not like your T-shirt and send you home, you know, and so I would have that kind of adrenaline pumping, like, okay, I might be walking in to get fired. And then I would walk in and just focus and just do what I needed to do and work super hard at it. And then yeah, like I'd get back in my car at the end of the day and be just really adrenalized at what had just happened and super happy that I just saw that.
Yeah. Well, so that was one of your first chances really working with tape. Do you remember liking the sound of stuff playing back off tape?
It sounded really cool. I mean, everything was 24 tracks, so it was just like it didn't really matter to me at that point because I'd never listened back digitally in there, so it was always from tape, so it always just kind of sounded like it did. So yeah, it was cool.
What are some other things that you remember learning, whether it was ways of recording stuff or some approach to to mixing that you arrived at when you were there? Any other takeaways?
No, I mean, everything was really his way, and even when it didn't make any sense, like you were working for him. I didn't make very many creative decisions. I mean, there were a few times that I would mix and be by myself, and he would come in and say, cool, or he would come in and say, I don't like it. And so it was more just getting things done really fast and moving on to the next thing.
Yeah. Do you remember getting a sense that maybe that's the takeaway? Is sometimes you work with a successful artist and it kind of doesn't matter how they do it, just that they have a way of doing it so that they can do it, Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Because I've seen that. I mean, like, one of my mentors in the first studio I worked at, he was very particular about how he did stuff. And there were many times where I'm like, that's so, weird. Like, why are we doing it this way? How come we don't do it this new modern way or whatever? And meanwhile, he just could consistently produce great records because he had a way of doing it. And I began to see that repeatedly, in the world of recording. It's like there's a huge amount of value on having a system that works. It doesn't matter whether it's an old system, a new system, one in between, makes sense to everybody else or is super unique.
Totally. Yeah. I'm sure I do things where people look at it and have a better idea in their minds, but it just works for me.
Yeah.
Same with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you reminded us of that when you talked about like, I use a print track. Oh, I guess I started doing that a while ago. Again, the important part is when you open up your old session, it's going to work and you know where to find stuff and you know how to take notes on it and everything.
Right. Yep. And it's just easy to know where you left off because you got a stereo track of where you left off.
Did you get to record any instrumentation when you were working with Prince, drums and bass and guitars and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, I was with him for a while. It was like, I want to say it was definitely my main gig for about 9 months, but I also went back after that a few times. So it was like a year and a half total. So I did a lot of band stuff. The horns, his horn section a couple times. And I mean, he was a nasty keyboard player. So I did a lot of work with him when he was playing keys. But yeah, I did a lot. I did a lot with him.
What are some things like any cool techniques that you can share about recording drums or anything like that?
For him in particular, or just in general?
Both.
I like room mics. I love room mics, so I'll use quite a few room mics and mono and stereo. I personally like to the sound of a more mono kit. I really like my drums centered. It's not like a rule or anything like that, but I typically mic a kit, drummer's perspective, and it ends up being somewhere really close to the center in the end.
Yeah, I find that too. I find like I lean towards stereo when I'm thinking about miking up the drums, but when I'm actually listening to music I like or trying to get the mix to sound awesome, I really just care about the kick and the snare in the middle.
Sure. Yeah. I don't really have like a set of standard practices when it comes to recording anything. I like to just try something new every time, and it's usually just kind of what I'm in the mood for, and I'll do that.
Dig it. All right, let's just pretend you got a session tomorrow and you got to mic up drums and it's a rock band and you're not really sure what they sound like yet. What might you choose?
I would start with a U47 about 2 feet in front of the kick drum and maybe 2 feet above it. Probably use a D12 on the kick, maybe a 421 or maybe an M80. Probably use an M88 actually.
That's a dynamic, right?
Yep. 57 on the snare, probably top and bottom. Probably 420 or probably 414s on the toms.
Okay, condensers. Nice. What about the pickup pattern on those mics?
I like those things flat and usually with a little bit of pad on it.
But don't you have to select cardioid, supercardioid?
Oh, yeah, I would be cardioid on the toms for sure.
Okay, dig.
Actually, not for sure. I mean, like maybe, probably.
Right. Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, they'd probably be in cardioid.
What are things that would help you choose to do a different pickup pattern? Would it be like how the cymbals are bleeding in behind the mic or any of that stuff?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I love the sound of mics and Omni just in general, and so I would say it would either be Omni or cardioid. But really, when it comes to toms, like toms are one thing that I will go into Pro Tools and I will just cut out all the bleed. I don't care for that. Unless it's maybe like a jazz thing, I don't care for it.
Yeah. In other words, Rockstars, what we mean is just the sound of the toms constantly ringing through from the kit when they're not being played.
It's basically putting a gate on the toms, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to set gates now when you can just edit the toms out with Pro Tools than it was when you had to find the perfect gate setting.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't mess with that anymore either. I just cut them.
How about your overheads? What would be your setup for tomorrow?
Probably U67s, probably Norman U67s. I really like U67s on overheads, or Cole's 4038s. If I wanted something darker.
Mm-hmm.
And I would use, if I didn't use the Coles on overheads, they would definitely be in the room, along with probably a C24.
Nice. And what about the spacing of those overheads? What's a starting place?
I like them. I kind of look at them more as like cymbal microphones rather than like kit overhead mics. So I keep them pretty low to the cymbals, and make sure they when I'm in the room. I don't really ever use a tape measure or anything like that, but I like to just make sure the snare and the kick are right up the middle.
Right. So they're about the same distance from each of those two mics. So you might space them out so that they're sort of in the vicinity of the crashes or the cymbals.
Yeah, exactly.
What about hi-hat mics? Do you find those to be useful?
Yeah. I usually put like a KM84 on a hi-hat. If I end up using it, cool. Same with the ride. Usually a KM84. If I were to do it tomorrow, that's probably what I would do.
Where does it go? I mean, what part of the hi-hat do you point the mic at? Would you point it towards the snare, or would you be sort of pointing away from the snare?
I just do it vertical right on the outside of it.
So meaning it's right above the hi-hat, just looking straight down?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Take it.
I mean, pretty much always that's what it'll be.
Okay, cool. All right. Cool. So it's just really seeing the detail of the stick on the hat and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
I find that, it's a good reminder sometimes to remember that even the hi-hat, kind of like the toms, like doesn't necessarily have to live in there perfectly balanced all the time. Sometimes it's useful for that verse where you just need to hear the hi-hat up closer.
Yep.
But it can go away in the chorus or whatever. If somebody's, a big challenge for me is when somebody opens the hi-hat halfway and starts doing, it's just like, boy, it just takes over.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Cool, man. Let's talk about some of the records that you've done too. So, one of the things I wrote down was that you worked with an artist named Sam Nitsch.
Yeah, Nitsch. Yeah,
a little girl. And there was a real nice use of space and reverb on the guitars. Well, first of all, let me just preface this by saying that your whole playlist, like everything really sounded great,
Oh, sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so, I'm listening to this and the space on the guitars is really nice. And I wondered if you wanted to talk about how you like to look for cool ambience in a recording or a mix, delays, reverbs. And then one other detail on that is it sounded like it might have been a sample, but there was some glockenspiel and stuff in that track.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was real. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that can be a little tricky to record well sometimes, and I wondered if you wanted to talk about how you record things like glockenspiel and other mallet instruments.
Yeah. Well, the guitars that Sam had an awesome setup. He basically called me out of the blue and said he wanted me to just hire the band for him. He had sent me a bunch of demos and we've been talking, and he finally got to a point where he was ready to just let go of anything that he had done in the past, and he really just wanted to try something different. So I had Steve Gould on drums, who's a great drummer, and Ian Allison on bass, who's an amazing bass player. And then the guitars, that's all this guy named Jasper Nephew. Everything, all the effects. I might have added some stuff to it every once in a while, but all the stereoizing, everything, that is Jasper, and he is so good. And all that stuff is first take. I mean, he is so fast and so good at doing that kind of stuff.
Nice. So you're saying you're basically recording a stereo 2 amps or something like that,
Yeah, I was. Let's see. I used a Fender Twin I think it was probably from the 70s. And then on the other side, a Three Monkeys orangutan,
Nice.
which is a really cool, awesome amp. It's super cool. And yeah, I mean, he walked in, he could care less what kind of amp was being used. He would just plug into it, and he just comes out of his pedal board, which is huge, massive pedal board. It like almost like the first time I worked with him, I saw his pedal board and was just like, you gotta be kidding me. I don't want this in here. Like, there's no way. And then I started listening to him play, and he's lightning fast, and he's so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because I've seen pedal boards come in the studio and be a tone killer, and I've seen them come in the studio and be the answer to what the song needed.
Yeah. I mean, his feet are moving just like his hands are throughout the entire song. I mean, he's turning stuff on and off the entire take, every take. It's amazing. Wow. Yeah.
All right. So then what are some other thoughts about, like, what mic do you stick in front of amps like that?
Look, it kind of varies on that too, but for electric guitars, I really like Sennheiser 441s for a dynamic mic, and then I'll use a Royer 121 a lot, and also really, I had never used one until I came to the power station New England, but the Neumann M269, which is kind of like the best way I can describe it is like it's like a little bit more of a hi-fi U67. It's a tube mic. It sounds really cool. So I've been using that a lot on guitars too.
Okay, cool. So basically a condenser, a big diaphragm condenser mic.
Right. Tube. Yeah, definitely tube.
Yeah. All right. And then what about the glockenspiel and mallets question? What thoughts do you have about that?
I don't think I could actually tell you what mic I used on that for him, but I would guess it was a Coles 4038, a ribbon.
Okay, or maybe so a ribbon.
Maybe an RCA 44, like something like that.
Why would you choose those mics to record an instrument like a glockenspiel?
Just the softness of those microphones and such a transient instrument, and I don't really mic things like that close. It was probably 4 or 5 feet away, maybe even more. And so just really like finding something that is going to satisfy a sound that's hard to sound satisfying.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's a fair takeaway to remind ourselves that sometimes the mic that you choose is sort of the opposite of the instrument you're about to record? Like if the instrument is dark, then a bright mic might be the right choice because it helps bring out the detail. And if it's a super bright instrument like drums and cymbals, then the darker mic tends to be a good choice because it sort of contrasts it a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yep.
What about compression and limiting? Do you find that those are really useful for, like, I mean, I've experimented sometimes and, you do a really fast attack and release and you can really manage the spike in a glockenspiel hit, for example.
Yeah, I guess so. I also don't know if I would have recorded with one or not, or even if I added one. I don't know. I think with that, I would probably, honestly, if I were to do that tomorrow too, I'd probably just throw up a ribbon mic and put it through a channel on the Neve and roll off some highs. And that's about it. I probably wouldn't compress it.
Dig it. All right. Yeah.
Unless it needed it. But I probably wouldn't start with that.
All right. So another record you did was Danny Morrison, Honey Drip, and which rocks pretty hard, but it still sounds smooth, So I wonder if you wanted to talk about ways that you can keep a rock record from getting too harsh.
Sure.
Things like vocals, guitars, and then just whatever, the overall sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably goes back to the players too. That was Jeremy Tappero on drums who had worked with in St. Paul. He came out to the power station for a little bit, and we worked with this guy, Solomon Silber, who's an amazing guitar player. And the two of them really wrote the music, and Danny came in later and did the vocals to it. But I think we ended up with a U87 on Danny. I think that's what ended up sounding the coolest on his vocal. And the drums were, some darker cymbals and Jeremy hits really hard, and he doesn't necessarily hit the cymbals super hard, which I really like in a drummer. If it heavy consistent hits on the actual drums and controlled cymbal hits.
It's so key.
Super helpful. Yeah.
What about the times when you get a track to work with and it's already a little bit too bright? Are there some useful ways to manage that at the mix stage?
Yeah, I mean, assuming I'm doing it I think like tube gear or tape emulators really help with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I really like the Studer tape machine, the U87 or the U87, the UAD stuff. I think that's like the first thing I would do if something sounded too harsh. Would maybe put a Fab Filter EQ on it and follow that up with that tape machine, and then kind of look at it like it's ground zero at that point.
So Fab Filter EQ, like maybe not making any choices yet, but just being ready, or would you maybe
probably just being ready, or just finding the frequencies that are bugging me and just get rid of them.
Yeah. I know the newer Fab Filter, what is it? The Pro Q3 or something like that. I think it has dynamic EQ in it where you can sort of manage a frequency range.
Right.
I don't know that I've tried that on a full mix. I've certainly tried multiband compression on a full mix, and I've that's kind of similar, I guess. I find that can help sometimes, but it can also take the power out of what you're doing, and so that's always a balancing act.
Yeah. I don't use a lot of multiband compression. I don't know why, but I just don't.
No, there you go. Maybe I need to stop because your record sounded real good.
Or maybe I need to start.
I think we all do. Whatever we're doing, we all need to try the other thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So another aspect of the Honey Drip record was the overall mix had this nice like pumping deep kick thing going on, and I wonder if you want to talk about getting that kind of effect.
I think that was probably I know what you're talking about, and I don't know if I actually was like purposefully doing that effect on like or going for it to actually do that. But I think that when it actually ended up happening, I liked it and left it. But I really like this to imagine the drummer hitting the drums. Like I really want to be able to like visualize that particular drummer in that particular room hitting that particular drum. And so with the kick drum, I think that I was trying really hard to imagine Jeremy hitting that kick drum with his pedal, and like he's a super tall guy, and so just trying to get it to sound the way that he plays, and that's probably what it ended up happening. Well,
one of the things that's interesting to me is in rock mixes and rock tracks, I often find that I want to have a sense of the kick drum, but whenever I try and add more beater, to make a cut through the track, that can often be like, that doesn't seem right. It's like too alien. And that the pumping effect where the low end of the kick sort of affects all the other instruments and makes them, pump just a little bit in the compression is a cool way to make the whole track seem exciting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that there's probably a fine line to where you could take that too far pretty easily. But,
totally.
But yeah, I agree. I think for certain stuff like it's a cool way to think about it.
When you're using something like an SSL, a quad compressor, or anything that's stereo compression on the whole mix, for example, or even just on the drums, a lot of the times those might have a sidechain filter where you can sort of do a low cut on the sidechain. Do you ever use that feature in situations, and do you find that's useful?
You mean to just to let those lower frequencies go through without being compressed or have it? Yeah, I do that often. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Can you describe, help us understand how that's useful and what to listen for?
Sure. I think that, I think yesterday I just mixed a song, where I have a stereo compressor, on the drum bus. So all of the drums are coming out of the 2-channel drum bus. And when the kick drum, the kick drum is fairly loud with quite a bit of low end, and without that filter, the low end of that kick drum is going to completely affect the compression of everything. So if you have that filter on, it's going to let that low end through, and you don't have that issue anymore.
Okay, so it's kind of the same topic we were just talking about. It's just another way to control that pumping effect.
Totally, and that's probably
avoid it possibly.
Or that would be avoiding it in that scenario. Yeah, but that's also probably what happened in Honey Drip too, where instead of all the drums being pumped together, I would with the low end of the kick, I probably would have let all that low end through, and then had something else doing that pumping thing, probably on the stereo bus, I would think, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because if you wanted to affect everything a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's probably what happened.
Okay, so this does.
I'm glad you like that song. It was a cool song.
Yeah, it was cool, man. It was fun to listen through all this stuff.
Nice.
So, this brings up the topic of low end. We're talking about kick drums, bass guitars, things like that. Do you want to talk any more about how you might address kick and bass in a mix and stuff you think about, or ways that those two, do you route them together so that they get treated together? Do they get separated? Just anything you can think of.
I think I did route them together for a while, for a long time. And I've kind of recently gone to this idea of that I really no longer have a template that I work off of. I was working off a really specific Pro Tools template that I'd built up over time, and I think that I started to realize that it was holding me back from trying new things. So now every time I mix a song, I start from scratch completely. And so that gives me the ability to make a decision whether or not I want to put the drums and bass together every single time, rather than starting with them that way.
What do we listen for if we put the drums and well, first of all, what does it mean to put the drums and bass together? And second of all, what are we listening for as a result?
I think just to be totally honest with you, I am 100% relying on my gut the entire time. I'm never worried about technical things or why things should be a certain way or what frequencies are being affected and why they're being affected. I'm just going with where my gut's telling me to go. Yeah. And so that's really the main thing that I'm listening for, is what what my gut's telling me to do, and if I feel like the bass and drums should be affected the same way through a similar or the same compressor, just to see what that does, I'll just try it, and if it works, then it stays, and if it doesn't, then it goes.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's a good takeaway, just knowing that, hey, there's two different ways to try this, and the only answer is try them both as fast as you can and pick the one that feels better.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course Mixmaster Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is these techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you're using right now. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to Mixmaster Bundle to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, so let's see. What about other things that help you make sure that your low end in general is right in your mixes?
I've got three sets of speakers that I listen on in the studio. The PMC IBE 1S's or IBS 1s, they're awesome. So I pretty much track everything through those. And I really feel confident with where the low end is while I'm tracking.
So those are the big ones where you can really hear the bass and everything.
Yeah. They sound so cool. I love them. And I mix on them pretty often too. But pretty much when I'm mixing, I've got a set of NS10s, and that I've had forever. They're my first speakers that I ever purchased. And then my friend, did you ever meet Norman Druce? He just passed away.
No, sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear about Norman. Yeah. So timing of this will be a little later. It'll be more in a couple of weeks, but yeah, I heard about that. So Norman was Atomic Instruments. Yeah.
Norm was a really close friend of mine. We worked at Paisley Park together. We worked at Electric Lady together.
Wow.
He built the speakers for me. So I've got NS10s and his speakers that are called. They weren't actually called anything when he made them for me, but now I think they're called the 610s or something.
Yeah, those are such good sounding speakers.
Yeah. So I've got those, and there's never any question as to where the low end is on those. Wow. I know right away.
That's pretty wild. I feel like now if we're gonna give a shout out to somebody, another person that recently when we recorded this just passed is Steve Sadler here in Nashville, who is the MCI guy.
Yeah.
And, so we miss you, Steve.
And Ed Cherney.
And Ed Cherney too.
It was a tough week.
Yeah. Tough week. Now, of course, when everybody hears this, it'll be like, well, wasn't that a while ago? But that's
right. Yeah. Still.
Yeah. And then Steve, the reason I mentioned Steve too, is also because you talked about, your experience with tape and everything. And that is, losing Steve is the closing of a little bit of an era on tape, just because he had so much knowledge about the MCI tape machines.
Yeah, man. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So let's see. Getting the bass right is checking it on these different speakers. I feel like it's a good reminder and takeaway what you said too about tracking with the PMCs and then mixing on the NS10s. It's that reminder that when you're tracking, that's a good time to make sure that when the shit's turned up really loud and it's cranking, that you hear that bottom and the low end the way you want it, and you can really feel the energy. And it's also, tracking is a little bit less of a critical listening time than mixing is,
Yep.
I feel it's like you said it you set it, you get it right, and you're like, cool. And now it's out of your hands and it's up to the musician for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's true. I definitely work really hard on getting. I commit a lot, so I'm EQing everything all the time when I'm tracking, and so I want whatever's going into the machine to sound pretty cool, and
yeah.
I think the PMC has really helped me feel confident in that.
And so you're the EQ that you're reaching for is that 8068 a lot of times?
Yeah. I mean that, and we've got a handful of Pultec EQP1s and GML 8200. So like between those are definitely my hardware EQs. But yeah, the Neve, I love those EQs. They're super cool.
Yeah, and the Neve has got, I think we got low cut and a high cut and then 3-band EQ or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So it might be like cutting out some lows, maybe adding a little bass or cutting it, and then top and finding the mids that you like.
Yep. Sounds about right.
All right, cool. It's been a while since I used that 8068, but all I remember is that everything I got a chance to do, which wasn't a lot, sounded better than anything I'd ever done.
Yeah, you should come back. You should come out and visit sometime. You would love it.
Oh, I definitely would love to. Talk about the wood in that room. So the room at Power Station, what is it, like knotty pine on the walls or something? Like this really looks so inviting.
Yeah, it's all knotty pine, and they're like there's actually in this whole space, there's a lot of surfaces. There's so many walls in this room, and nothing's parallel, which is kind of crazy. Like it's easy to like think like, well, obviously, but when you see how like many walls there are, it's kind of crazy that there's actually not. And so all of the boards are spaced differently. Like in the big room, all the pine boards are like maybe, I don't know, 1.5 inches apart from each other, and in between there's some sort of absorption. And then in this back room that I'm sitting in, the boards are maybe 4 inches apart. So there's a lot more absorption. So you get this like really pleasing reflective thing and this really pleasing absorption happening all the time. So it's cool. It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about all those slats too, I seem to remember that that's a form of Helmholtz resonator or something like that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I don't know how that stuff works, but yeah.
I don't either, but I think it's a combination of having a certain frequency that it's absorbing, but it diffuses the reflection of the sound.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's cool. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm ready to redo all the walls in here and make it look like that.
Right.
might take me a minute.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So another record you worked with, there's a band called Hippocampus Monsoon, as a track in our playlist. And it just, it's a band on stage performing, but I'm looking at the mics and I'm like, it's just live mics, it's like wireless mics that being sung on and stuff like that. And your mix of it sounds great, and I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about, doing a well-recorded and mixed live stage track. What are some important things that you have to get right, maybe when you're recording and when you're mixing?
Yeah. I actually did do the live sound for that. It was the first time I'd done live sound for something like that. So it was fun. But they're really talented. And they sing really well. They play their instruments really well. And I think that was just direct outs of a console. So there's nothing special about recording it. Everything was just kind of preamps.
I guess in all fairness, I don't remember if there was a drum kit on stage. So that might be one challenge.
There was a drum kit, but he's playing brushes. So it's like kick, snare and hi-hat maybe.
Yeah. So get the stage volume right first.
Yeah, and they could have been in-ears too. No, you know what? They did have wedges. They were on wedges there. But I think it was the way that I looked at that was like I would look at any other song, is that it needed to feel like the way that the guys wrote it. It's a sad song, and it kind of feels like the way that I wanted it to sound was like you could have done better on something in your life at one point, and you could have. And I think that's the way that it was sung and performed, and so I think that's really the best way I can describe the sound of that, is just making it sound the way that the song is supposed to sound or feel.
And then the mics, like the vocals sound great on it, yet I guess they're just dynamic wireless.
I probably did a lot of EQing, and probably a lot of compressing. But I couldn't tell you what I actually did, but I think that those mics sounded good.
Yeah,
I think he sang well and they sounded good.
Wasn't there some acoustic guitar too, like maybe a DI or something like that?
Yeah. There was acoustic, and it might have been mic'd also, but not coming. The mic, I don't think, was going through the system.
Do you find DIs to be useful in the recording stage?
I rarely use DIs on guitars in the studio, but on bass I use them every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I got one more question on one of your records. Christoph Crane, All Zone, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it. All 7-1 or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's supposed to be Alone, but
Alone. Sorry. Oh, maybe I just accidentally stuck a 7 in there. I don't know.
There is a 7 in there.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
It's got a great vocal tone, and amongst the rest of it too. It's a hip hop track too. So I wondered if you wanted to talk about some good techniques for recording and mixing rap vocals and hip hop.
Yeah, I think that might have been the only hip hop song I've ever done. And I was into it. Like that's why I sent it to you.
So what you're saying is you quit at the top. You're just like nailed it, done.
Yeah, I mean that was produced by a guy named Graham O'Brien, who's really good, and I think I used a lot of effects on the vocal. I think I used some some distortion stuff, and there's what's the name of that delay that I was totally into at that point?
Echo, like Echo Boy or something like that?
No, the company that makes like the free reverb, Valhalla delay. It was the Freak Echo or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but I used that a lot, and that has like a totally cool like almost you can take a vocal and make it sound like it's like inside your ear.
I like that.
I think I probably used that and then really just liked to turn that kick drum really loud and make sure his vocal was like kind of just kept floating right in the middle.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has the vocal sounds like it's just right up there and it's not going away. Not too loud, but it never disappears,
Right. Yeah. Yep.
If you're going to do things like distortion on vocals and stuff like that, are there any good tricks or reminders about like, hey, you actually need to like edit the starts and stops of this, or you need to gate it or any of that kind of stuff if it's a parallel effect?
Yeah, I would say I generally don't do effects on a parallel level like that. If I were to put distortion on a vocal, I would probably insert it right on the Pro Tools channel. And yeah, I mean, if there's any any unnatural sounding noises, then you got to get rid of those. And if it sounds cool with the distortion, then you might be going in on some crossfades to get that to sound good.
Yeah. There was another overdub in there, or some track that had just like sounded real wider than real life stereo effects is what I wrote down. Do you have any, like, when you're like, oh, I want to make this sound kind of 3D, like it's wrapping around your head, are there any like things that you would reach for, or any advice about, like, how to get sound effects like that?
Yeah. I like to use a couple different things. I really like the Waves Mondo mod for stuff like that kind of has that like that thing that can kind of feel like it's wrapping around your head a little bit. And then I also like the UA precision widener. And I don't usually put that like right on a track, but I'll use that off a send, like off an aux send. And so if I've got a guitar that feels cool at the level that it's at, but I want it to kind of have a little more space from the center, I can take that aux send and pan it to wherever that track is panned on the track, and then just boost it into a widener, and it just kind of makes it feel like it's exiting the speakers a little bit.
So let me see if I understand that one again. So the guitar is really a mono miking sound, but we're also sending it to the widener, and that makes it feels like it's just a little bit more stereo and wider. Yeah,
exactly. So I don't know if I explained that well. So if I had like a mono guitar that's panned all the way to the left, and I take an aux send to a stereo aux track, and on that stereo track I put that precision widener, and I choose the left and right on that widener. If you send that guitar to the left side of that widener, it kind of, whatever phasing it's doing is kind of just pushing that sound a little farther out than it would be without it.
I see. So it's not like we're trying to make the guitar sound stereo. We're just trying to make it sound like it's more left than left.
Exactly.
All the way left. Okay,
exactly.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks for explaining that and breaking that down.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, go ahead.
No, sorry. It's all good.
Well, I was going to say, let's jump into some of our closing questions here as we roll out. When you were starting out and recording, what do you feel like was holding you back?
It was probably the music I was listening to. was probably pretty freaking terrible.
Was it all edited to death or something?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was probably a lot of that.
I seem to remember one of the first things that struck me about that era of like super edited music was that you could do like incredible mutes that couldn't exist before. Like you could just make everything go dead silent for a moment.
Yeah. I was into that stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's worth learning about. It's worth exploring until you're sick of it and you don't care anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
How about some of the best advice you remember receiving in the studio?
Probably Neil Dorfman's become a really good friend of mine. And he's such a good engineer, and he's been through so much. And I think the last time I saw him, he was just like, make everything sound really good. And I know that it sounds like super obvious, but like he's so detailed on every single thing that he records that it doesn't matter if it's just like a split second sound that's coming in the middle of the song and is never heard again. He's going to make sure that it sounds amazing before it gets recorded. And so I think that was some pretty strong advice.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. There's a guy here, a friend of mine named Ken Coomer, who played drums with Wilco and produced a lot of great records. And I think he gave me shared the anecdote once that supposedly came down from Prince, who you worked with, that like you should be able to solo any track. And I think that meant like you should be able to solo it and it should sound cool even if it's by itself, you know? It's
Yeah, I mean, I think
idea.
there's truth to it. Yeah, I think there's truth to that. Yeah.
Like, don't let something be crappy just because you're like, oh, well, we don't need to worry about this.
Exactly. Then why would it be there unless it's helping?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you want to share one more recording tip, hack, or secret sauce? Anything that the rock stars could use on their next session?
Yeah, I think something that I've just kind of realized over the past couple of years is that I don't really have like a strong like novelty for recording to tape. It's not something that I'll do just because it's tape, or because it does a certain thing. But I love the sound of strings and horns through tape. I think that it is the best way to record strings and horns.
Nice.
I would say that's the best recording hack I got right now.
All right, good one. And if you don't have a tape machine, use a tape plug-in.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Yep. So how about a favorite hardware tool in the studio or something you're excited about now, something physical?
We've got an old, like one of a really old U47, best mic I've ever used.
All right. Dig it.
Yeah.
How about a favorite software tool or something you're excited about right now?
I think the only plugin that I definitely, without a doubt, use on every song would probably be the UA 140 plate with I put an EQ on the front and back of it, but I love that reverb. I think it's amazing. What
do you do with the EQ? What should the rock stars know about, like, oh, I put an EQ on there. Oh, now what do I do with it?
I make sure that there is no like artificial S sound in my reverbs. I do not like the sound of that washed out S sound in a reverb.
Seems like that was a big thing in the 80s, and really.
Yeah, when I hear that, I get super uncomfortable, so I get rid of that.
Right, dig it. That's probably the answer, is like the EQ is there to get rid of whatever's making you uncomfortable about the reverb.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes you dial it in, you like, that reverb's pretty good, but it just doesn't feel right. And sometimes it's as simple as like, just get rid of things that don't need to be there.
Yeah, I roll off the high end, roll off low end, and that usually does it.
Nice. How about a resource or tip for the business side of doing this? You've been doing this for a minute. I guess you're chief engineer, which I don't know if that means you're doing studio management or anything like that as well. But do you have anything you want to share with the rock stars about doing this for more than just a hobby?
Yeah, I think that I think probably something I learned the hard way, but I'm just honest with everybody right away, right at the beginning, and I base every relationship that I have, whether it's someone who wants to come book the studio or if I'm going to mix something for somebody, it's just make sure that foundation of that relationship is built on honesty, and it'll work.
Yeah, communication is pretty important.
Yeah, like don't lie, and then you're good, and then it'll be good. And those a lot of my best friends are people that started as clients, and that wouldn't be the case if it wasn't built on good communication and honesty.
Yeah. So you start out by going, hey, listen, guys, I just want you to know that as we enter this session, instinctively, I really want to pick a fight with all of you and get you to fight amongst yourselves, but I'm not going to. So I'm letting you know.
It's like a stray dog. Like you just like can't get rid of some of those old things. Yeah, I'm gonna really want to pick a fight with everyone.
if you're not pulling each other's hair out, then I don't feel right.
Yeah.
How about staying organized? Obviously, something you learned early on. Any tips or something for that? Or like an online resource that will help the rock stars keep their sessions or their studios organized? You
can shoot me an email, and I will send you PDF that I give to all the assistants who work here.
Ooh,
and it just shows, I mean, I have not gotten that far on it. It's like just a few pages, but kind of it's as detailed as I've gotten into like sharing how I need things to be done with other people. And I can show you that, and you can take it and like it or hate it. I don't care.
Nice. Should we just add that to the blog post in the show notes?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So this last question is hypothetical here. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you're going to go back in time, find young Evan Bakke, and say, "Listen, dude, put down your Alvarez for a moment. I got to talk to you. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice would you go back and give yourself?
Oh, man. I would say make sure everybody is having fun. Yeah. And stop doing projects that you hate. And stop editing. That's probably what I would say. Yeah.
That's funny. Do you feel like the more you do projects that you love, the less editing you started doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially when I started hiring session guys. Minnesota has, I know, like I've never done like a gig with session guys in Nashville, and I know that it's probably a great experience. But there are some really great session guys in Minnesota, like really great. I fly them out here often.
Right on.
So as soon as I started using those guys, it really opened my mind up to like, okay, this is awesome.
Well, it's like viciously cold 9 months out of the year. You got nothing to do except rehearse.
Yep, exactly. Sit in the studio all night. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Evan, thanks so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us, man. Total blast hanging out with you and hearing these cool stories, man. I mean, after all,
Lidge.
I'm pretty sure we just learned Prince's vocal chain. That's pretty badass. So
there you go. Yeah, I don't know how long it stayed that way, but it was his chain for a little bit.
There you go, man. Awesome, dude. Yeah. Well, let the Rockstars know how they can find you. Where should they go online to follow you and go check out Power Station and call you to make the next hit record?
Yeah, you can go. I've got a website. It's just evanbakke.com. There's an email link there. You can go there. PowerStationNE.com is the studio website. You can also reach me there. And then Instagram, I think, is PowerStationNE.
All right, cool.
That's it.
And Rockstar, as a reminder, Bakke is spelled Bakke.
That's right.
All right, dig it. Well, Evan, thanks so much, man. Look forward to hanging with you, and I can't wait to come see the Power Station sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Lidge. It was awesome, man.
All right, man. Talk soon. Cheers.
See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, rock stars. I also want to give a big thank you to our sponsors who helped make this episode possible: OWC, Whisper Room, Eventide Audio, Spectra 1964, and Roswell Pro Audio. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. These are all things that I highly recommend you check out for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Cheers.